We're excited as a church to welcome back Sandra Samuels. Sandra and her family were actually attended Calvary a couple times, and then they decided the sermons were way too long. No, I'm just kidding there. But we're excited to have her and her husband, Don. They lost a vehicle, so Don's somewhere else. At something like this, probably. And so they have one vehicle, and so we have the better half tonight here at Calvary. And Sandra is dressed up for a little Halloween party, so it looks good.
Thank you. I didn't so much of my mask.
Yeah, there you go.
It's okay.
Yeah, we could see a little bit. The lighting in here is not the greatest at night. But thank you for those of you at home on Zoom for checking this out. Sandra again will present an alternative view that you were presented last time, representing a vote no philosophy or thought. And so again, Sandra and Don, her husband, used to be a council member. You know that the Samuels are incredibly involved in the life of Minneapolis. They live out there in both their professional lives and in their neighborly lives. They are deeply embedded and engaged, whether you agree with them or not. That's one thing, but there's great respect to both of you for all that you guys do and are and mean to our city. And I'm gonna let Carol say hello tonight again. Carol, our great leader of our faith and justice team here at Calvary.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for the volunteers helping. And thank you for Sandra being willing to speak with us. But again, we are going to take a moment to remember George Floyd. In fact, he was killed and murdered, and the whole world was watching. And that's why we're here this night, to remember and find a way that Minneapolis can do it better. So I'm going to ask us all just to remember this for a moment. Thank you. For a few logistics, first of all, I'll do Jeff's job for this. 10 a.m. Sunday, join us for Calvary if you don't already come here. It's a great place to get connected in worship. And that's 10 a.m. on Sundays. The other things we want to tell you logistically is many of you got a questionnaire to fill out. When she is done speaking, Pastor Jeff and I will be asking the questions. If you didn't get a questionnaire, you can raise your hand and some of the ushers can give you one. If it goes well and things are, we have more questions, we'll also allow people to ask their questions also, if it's done respectfully. So at this point, we're going to turn it over to Sandra for her presentation of why to vote no for the public safety amendment.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, Pastor Jeff. Appreciate it. And Pastor Jeff is so wrong about that. We love this church. I forgot, so it's been some years, but each street has built up around you. So it's like the location is amazing, yet again. So everybody, thank you so much. And so here's the deal. Pastor Carol cut me off when it's time. And because I feel like, so here I am, and faith is really important to me. And I, know myself as an immortal diamond of God, as you all are. And so to be in a church, and if you don't mind, I don't often talk to churches. We're talking to just and I'm sure everybody has faith of some kind, or maybe not, but we in a church. so I'm gonna act like that, if you don't mind. And I'm assuming that we all believe that there is a supreme being that loves us, and that we are the beloved. And that we're just playing things out here. And to the degree that God and the kingdom of heaven is present, we bring it, right? So we bring it. So I'm gonna start off. So absolutely vote no on question 2. That's the position. But let me tell you this, I don't know if I'm right. I don't know. Like God, I believe that God is in control. All I know to do is what I feel called to do as a Black woman who lives in the middle of North Minneapolis. I don't live in St. Paul. So the presenter who would have presented from Yes for Minneapolis is from St. Paul. I've debated a council member who's part of Isaiah, who's also part of Faith in Minnesota, who's a council member in Richfield. You know, I'm Minneapolis, and I'm North Minneapolis, and I'm a Black mama, and I'm a child of God, right? And I don't know if I'm right. All I know is what I feel like God has put on my heart, right? And time will tell. And so tonight, by the way, I'm not trying to get you to believe the way I believe. I'm just not. One of the things that I've realized with all of this is that we all have our own agency, and the Holy Spirit speaks to all of us. So the scriptures that talk about, you know, how will they know unless someone is sent, right? Is we get to hear, and then we take it all in, and we get to decide based on how the Spirit guides us. And so I'm not trying to convince you tonight. I just need you to know that. I think that the folks who want you to vote yes, and some of you probably are planning on voting yes. That's the other thing. People who are already planning on voting yes are going to vote yes. And people who are already planning on voting no are going to vote no. It doesn't matter what I say tonight. But what I invite you to, and what I've asked the Holy Spirit to let me be a part of, is being open to what his children are saying, her children are saying, their children are saying. And then the Holy Spirit in us speaks. So I'm not trying to convince you tonight. So actually, let me reframe that to say, I'm voting no. And I'm going to tell you why, to the ballot question number 2. This is a picture, and can we put it on full PowerPoint instead of yeah. So I when I saw this diagram, I thought, so perfect, right? So brief history of a black man's neck, right? So we have the noose, the hanging that happened, the lynching, slavery, you know, everything that the putrid foundation that this country is built on, right? So that's there. And then so Officer Chauvin was a manifestation of what we all know. Maybe we don't know. I think there's a significant portion of our country that doesn't want to believe. And that's where the issue of critical race theory, for example, that just deals with, this is what happened, this is how it impacts policy. That was the genesis of the critical race theory. So anyway, there's a bunch of folks who don't want to believe, and I get that, I understand it, you know. But anyway, but this is then now the truth. You have to know I am not standing up here as an apologist for the police department, for the police. What has happened to my relatives, to Black men who have been in my life, and women, and I am outraged. And yes, we are standing here because of George Floyd, but I gotta tell you, I knew about the things that were happening to the George Floyds of America way before that video was taken. And most Black folks would say the same, like, oh, you just seeing what we've been living, right? And so you have a lot of liberal white folks, so I'm gonna just put it like that, who are now woke to what was happening, and they see it and their hearts are broken. And that's a good thing. Like, God works in broken hearts. And so that's a good thing. Don't ever hear me. I don't want you to hear me being derisive about that at all. And so I am aggrieved. I'm outraged. And what I know is that George Floyd, for me, was just something that white people saw, but it's something that I lived as a descendant of enslaved Africans. So we can go on to the next slide. So out of what happened with George Floyd, we got this movement of defund the police, abolish the police department, of creating a universe and a world where we don't have police, that police were grounded and founded, their origination, their reason for existence was originally to track down slaves who had run, like my great-great-grandma, Harriet Tubman. Like, that's the reason we got police, like originally, in terms of law enforcement, was to track down Black folks who wanted to be free. I know that history, that's my history, right? And it is nasty, and it is egregious, and we have to evolve as a people. Like, I get that, and I want that. So I want you to know that too. And still, I'm not trying to convince you to vote no. So defund the police moved out of that. And then if we can go to the next slide. So a year and a half ago, we had 9 council people. Here's where politics comes in, who stood on a stage and said, we are going to get rid of the police. What happened was egregious. And I agree with them. And by the way, I feel like throwing the damn police out too. I just need you to know that. And my family members feel the same way. Many community members who are Black feel the same way, right? So I understand this. This was a political move by political actors who had long been Black Visions Collective, Reclaim the Block, who had long been working on abolishing the police. So here comes a moment, it's perfect, come together, council members, are you going to do it? 9 of them stood up on that stage and said, yes, we are going to move to defund the police department. I agree with that. Let me say that again, because I agree with the emotion of that. So let's go to the next slide. So what this amendment does is it is emotionality at its best. And it is white folks who for the first time saw what Black folks have lived and have said, those who are more liberal leaning, we've got to do something, we've got to make this right. And so they've said, we are going to abolish the police. Make no mistake, ballot question number 2 is a national movement to eradicate the police. The people who are most behind Yes for Minneapolis, which is a political action committee, which has raised $1.4 million in a movement to abolish the police that has raised $35 million, okay? 35 million. None of the stuff that any rich white person has invested in Minneapolis, who's from Minneapolis, compares to 35 million. Look it up. Anything that I'm saying, I invite you to go look it up because to see that I'm not making this stuff up, right? And so largely funded from outside interests, even Ben & Jerry's. Have anybody seen Ben & Jerry's latest ad? Ben & Jerry's that is based in Vermont, okay, have put out a call on Facebook. Has anybody seen that? Am I the only one? Thank you. Have put out a call to say vote no, or sorry, vote yes on question number 2 in Minneapolis. I don't know, last I checked, Ben and Jerry does not have a headquarters here. But this is a national movement with national interests, and what happens here is important to folks. And so this ballot question is all around moving towards abolishing the police. It is moving towards defunding, which the city has done, the police department. Now, what I will tell you is, like, yeah, I feel like that too, except I live in a city that is racist. I live in a city where Black children are undereducated versus white children, and it's been going on forever, and we've been okay with that. I live in a city where Black folks have not had decent housing the way white folks have, who have cabins, by the way. Many of us don't even have a place to live. Most white folks here have cabins, right? I live in that city. I live in a city where Black people in my neighborhood live 7 years less than white people in the surrounding communities of North Minneapolis. Blue Cross Blue Shield, everything I'm saying, anything, ask me, I will tell you where to find the material. I live in a city where the incarceration rate of Black folks is greater than almost any other place. I live in a city where the disparity between wealth and health and income and education and incarceration, that all of that is greater, that the disparities in terms of how white folks live here and Black people is huge, right? So for me, George Floyd and his murder, his egregious murder, was the tip of the racist iceberg here in Minneapolis. That under the waterline of that iceberg are all the other disparities that I'm talking about in education and health and wealth and income and incarceration. All of those are there. And we are squandering this moment to say that our solution to all of that is that we're just going to get rid of the police. So while we say that, right, because that's racist, it's built on a racist system. The thing that we're not willing to deal with is Black on Black violence. I said it as a Black person, okay? Community violence, Black on Black violence. We're not, white folks don't even want to touch that. So it's like, we can deal with police. We're gonna get with that. But that stuff that's happening in community, y'all handle that. I mean, like, for real, like, you know, that's what's going on. What I have up here is a friend of mine. Last summer, a 21-year-old, we're sitting on my deck in the backyard, couple, friends there. We hear gunshots. I hear gunshots every night. By the way, I have 5 neighbors four neighbors who have moved, a 5th who is moving, Black and white, who say they cannot stay in the city any longer. They cannot stay in North Minneapolis any longer because of the violence. Even the head of, I don't know if you've heard of African American Leadership Forum. It's 3,000 of us, mostly middle class, who are working on policy and changing conditions in the region for Black folks. The head of African American Leadership Forum is from North Minneapolis, born and bred. I'm not. I've been there like 24 years. I'm actually from the East Coast. He's from there. His son was doing homework in a better part of North Minneapolis. By the way, I live in, so our point of view depends on our point of viewing, right? So I'm giving you a point of view from a Black person who lives in a neighborhood that other Black people say they don't know how we live there, who live in North Minneapolis. But anyway, he lived in a better part of North Minneapolis, and bullets came through his house in this better part of North Minneapolis, which didn't happen before the edict that we were going to defund the police, that the leaders of the city were moving towards that people were not hating the police. And by the way, understandably, But I want to put out to you all here, who I think everybody here believes in God, that police officers have souls too. I don't know if we've forgotten that, but they do. And that not every single one of them is chosen. Not every single one of them are the ones who who abused Jalil Stalling. Y'all heard about that, right? The young man who thought he didn't know the police were the police during the riots. He shot at them, they shot at him. He put his hands up and they still beat him mercilessly. And in fact, tried to give him 9 years until the videos came out. You all probably heard about that. Like, not every cop is that cop. So anyway, the solution that we're coming up with is we're going to deal with that cop. We're going to deal with Chauvin, and we're going to eradicate the police department. We're going to eradicate the police chief. We're going to eradicate the minimum funding for police and the minimum number of police so that we keep Black folks safe, right? Black Lives Matter. But for my brother right here, sitting on our deck last summer, hearing gunshots, we called up, we do it all the time. We hear gunshots. We don't want to get immune to what's happening. So we call. I hear gunshots every night. I don't know if you do. I hear them every night, every day. And we live right next to where everybody's murdered. So we hear the gunshots, we call it in. Next thing you know, my friend who's on the deck with us gets a call, Devin's been shot. And we realized that we were calling the police to go see about Devin. And so this is Devin. And Devin had been shot twice in the neck. We can't even believe he's alive. Devin had to leave North Minneapolis. I don't know if we care about the Black young men who, if they stay, they're imperiled. And by the way, not by police. And so many of them had to leave. Devin had to leave his home because of fear of the guys who might be back. We have a gang warfare raging right now. And part of the warfare that's raging is, oh, Minneapolis is getting rid of its cops. Game on. And by the way, it's also the pandemic, right? So with the pandemic, we couldn't have a bunch of violent offenders or people incarcerated, staying incarcerated. Judges started letting them out. So by the way, this is like white folks who don't live in North Minneapolis don't need to know this. I do, because I live there, right? Letting them out so we got, and then all of the grudges, you shot me, that's why I'm locked up, I shot you. So we had gangs called Highs north of West Broadway. I live right 1 block north of West Broadway. And then Lowe's south of West Broadway, who are in a major warfare, okay? So 77 people have been murdered in this city so far this year. We are close to an all-time high because we're just in October. 565 people have been shot this year. And I bet you don't know all 565. I gotta tell you, I know about at least 500 because 51% of the 565 and the 77 who've been killed are from my neighborhood. 84% are Black, 83% are male, 30% are children. 4 children have been shot in the head. 3 have been murdered. 1 is fighting for his life. LaDavion Garrett Jr. I was with his great grandmother the other day, who herself is from North Minneapolis. And she said, Sandra, this shit about getting rid of the police is crazy. This is LaDavion's great grandmother who's from North Minneapolis. She said, it's crazy. So what we care about are Black people. That's what this bill is about. Black people who are harmed by police. But Black folks who are harmed by Black folks, and by the way, all of this is grounded in racism. We ain't crazy. We don't just like start shooting each other. There are reasons for this. And I don't even have time to talk about the racism that grounds Black on Black violence. I don't have time for that. But trust me when I tell you that it is all germinated by the same racism that has Chauvin put his knee on a Black man's neck. So this is Devin, and Devin's alive, but Devin is scarred. 77 people murdered, 84% of them Black, and 65 people shot. These are current numbers, all right? 83% of them male, again, 30 children. And this is us, this is our community. And people, what I hear, what I realize, everybody, is that, and I'm gonna talk about Black folks too, who don't, so of course, there's a whole bunch of Black folks who don't agree with me. Now, 75% of Black people polled said they don't want fewer officers. Only 42% of Black people polled said they want a new Department of Public Safety. You know why? Because we ain't cray-cray. People vote in their best interest. Other cities that move to defund and abolish the police, Dallas, Texas, Oakland, California, look this all up, I can send you articles. LA, New York City, Baltimore, Atlanta, all of them they defunded their police just like we did. They moved to abolish the police, just like the departments, just like we're doing. All of them are now moving to reform. They're believing that we can reform a corrupt system. And the difference between back then and now, everybody will say, we've tried all of that, it hasn't worked. We got to do something different. You know what's different now? We are. Never has there been a national conversation about police violence. We are absolutely not going to allow the police to just go on as usual, whether this vote passes or it doesn't. But in all of these cities, they have moved because, they have moved from defund and abolish to reform and refund. In Baltimore City, there was a city council person, like our 9 city council people who stood up on that stage that you saw just a moment ago, who voted to defund the police. Baltimore, this is where Freddie Gray died. Don't think that George Floyd is an anomaly. This has been going on all around the country. We just had our smartphone on George Floyd. And so with Baltimore, 22 million cut. Now that same person is now mayor, and they are Black person, and they are trying to refund the police department by 27 million. Let me tell you what the difference is between us and them. The difference is we have a majority of non-Hispanic white people in this city who vote in huge numbers. We are 60-something% non-Hispanic whites in Minneapolis, in Dallas, in Atlanta, in Baltimore, in New York, in LA, in Oakland, in the places that I mentioned to you. White, non-Hispanic white people make up only 30%. Tops 35% of the population. The majority are people who look like me, who are saying we cannot throw the bath water out with the baby. The bath water is funky, it stinks, it's putrid, it's poisoning us. But if we throw that out, we throw the damn baby out too. And in all of these cities, that Black folks are saying we can't do that. We got to fix the water and save the baby. Here in Minneapolis, this vote might pass. And when it passes, when we do an analysis of who voted for it, it's gonna be white folks who are woke now, who are liberal, who are caring and trust. Like, I hope I don't sound derisive because I'm not trying to be. That part is a good thing, but every good thing, some good things have a shadow side. And the shadow side is we care about Black lives that are killed by police. We don't know what to do with Black lives who are killed by other Black lives. So y'all handle that. And then let's go to the next one. Let's have this. So we're going to have this new Department of Public Safety. There is no plan. There's no plan. The city had a year and a half to come up, the city council people who stood on the stage. In fact, Don and I, who have been in North Minneapolis for 24 years, raised 3 girls. As soon as we saw our council person, Jeremiah Ellison, on CNN saying he was gonna defund the police, we called him right then and there. We took out our smartphones and we were like, hey, Jeremiah, what's up? We thought no decision about us without us. We've been here fighting for this community for like a quarter century, and you get to go on CNN and make a pronouncement that you're defunding the police and you haven't talked to us? And we know, and we're not, and when I say us, I'm talking about us, right? No conversation had been had in North Minneapolis. Because if you go talk to the majority of people in North Minneapolis, they're gonna say, are you crazy? It's our kids who are getting shot in the head. It's our kids who can't study, who can't learn. By the way, by the way, what I'm realizing is that the folks who are voting yes, the argument around the number of that 8 out of 10 Black people killed in Minneapolis are Black, 8 out of 10 people shot are Black, 8 out of 10 people victimized are Black. That doesn't matter. And I get that. And I feel like this is a Trumpian kind of thing, dynamic. I'm not comparing people who are voting yes with Trump, but Trumpian in terms of, you understand that people who support Trump, you can tell them anything. Like Trump said, I can go shoot somebody in Times Square and I still get voted for, and he did. So this argument around how many of us are dying and being shot and being victimized and not dealing anything with the Black on Black violence, which is steeped in racism, grounded in racism, that's not being addressed by this vote, that like doesn't mean anything. And what people will say is cops have abandoned their posts. By the way, we have 430,000 people in Minneapolis. We have 296 patrol officers. We have 430,000 people, 296 patrol officers, about 500 some odd cops on the job. So I've heard one of our colleagues say, opponents of this say, they've abandoned their posts, cops they've run away from the job. I just want to submit to you that they are human beings, that they're not all children, that they have husbands and wives and partners and children that they want to come home to too, that we're asking them to go into some of the most dangerous situations and keep us safe. So anyway, I'm gonna, and this is a shot of a young man murdered. Happens so often in North Minneapolis, it's not even funny. By the way, one of our candidates who's running for city council, who is opposing Jeremiah Ellison in our ward, is a big time, the person, I don't want to call the person out, but their interests were never safety. They weren't running on safety. It's a Black person. They were running on other things, right? But because of door knocking and what's happening in North Minneapolis, this person has stood up and said, I'm gonna have to vote no on ballot question number 2 because of all of the residents in North Minneapolis. And so this other group that's part of Yes 4 threatened to take this person's endorsement away. And the person said, safety has never been my primary thing. You know what my thing is, because that's why you endorsed me in the first place. And I can't listen to you and not listen to the 95% of the Black folks that I talk to in North Minneapolis and white, who say, we got to reform and refund. We can't live in our community and not do that. And the person said, you know, I've had my own son shot. I watched a rape right outside my home. A friend of mine's car has been broken in 4 different times. And come and live with me in my community and sit with my 10-year-old. This is the thing that touched me. And I called the person today to just tell them how powerful that letter was and asked if the endorsement had been taken away. And that person didn't know for sure. But the person concluded by saying, my interests are still your interests. I hope you don't abandon North Minneapolis around this interest, which wasn't safety. But the person said, if you could come to my dining room table and sit with my 10-year-old, who now does not care about the gunshots that he hears. He's unflappable around it. So we have, I lead a nonprofit in North Minneapolis, and our windows of my office have been shot up 3 different times. I have staff, majority from North Minneapolis, who are afraid to come back to work, who don't want to come back. I know I'm going to lose staff, right? And the school children who have been shot and killed, you know, we had a school, they're paraprofessional, who's a teacher who teaches and does other things in the school as well. They're not licensed. African-American young man, you may have heard about that, a couple of weeks ago, was murdered. The school had to shut down. We sent our community wellness team in, and the teachers couldn't teach and the students couldn't learn. The trauma that's being layered on us is not even being measured. But we get to be a woke city for the rest of the country, that we've said yes to this ballot proposition. So I'm going to close. If you could go to the next, and her son, the person's son, not even moving because of the gunshots, is more scary than the kids who are completely traumatized that you don't read about in the newspaper, right? You don't read about the kids who are afraid to go outside. You don't read about the kids in North Minneapolis who can't study, the teachers who can't teach. You don't read about those. So anyway, with the ballot question number 2, so no plan. The new commissioner of public safety would have to report to 14 different bosses. I don't know if you have ever worked. I know you have. You all have worked for different places. You know you can't answer to 14 different people. So even R.T. Ryback, who was mayor some years ago, finally came out about ballot question number 1. And this is not about ballot question number 1, but it does influence that. And R.T. finally came out and said, we have lost so many people in the city because they've had to answer to 14 different bosses. For that, no matter who in my administration who used to work for me said yes, I got to say no, don't do it. And we're all reasonable people. We know we couldn't do it, but we're expecting a city and a police department, sorry, not a police department, if that doesn't pass, but a Department of Public Safety to do it. It's not even logical. So there's no plan in place. Everything that you've gotten written, you know, all of the material that you've gotten in the mail. And by the way, I know you've gotten a lot because I have to say yes on ballot number 2. You've gotten way more on that saying yes than you have no. You've gotten way more telephone calls. You've gotten way more texts, and you've gotten way more just, you know, door knocks. That's because $35 million versus, you know, significantly less of locally funded initiative to say no, can't compete. We can't compete with that. I don't care. So no plan, 14 different bosses, no systemic change. So if you really want to change, you would address the police contract. There's nothing addressing the police contract. You would address arbitration rules that were set up by the union at the state level, which for the last three police chiefs, 50% of the time, when they have fired or reprimanded a children, they have been forced to rehire them because of arbitration rules that were negotiated at the state. 50% of the time. Anybody here lead any organization? Can you imagine if you had to hire, take back someone you fired or reprimanded because they were terrorizing people you cared about, in this case, Black people? You would quit. Like, I would quit. And by the way, that's what the chief is saying. The chief won't answer directly, but he's saying, you know, I need to talk to my family and so on. But, you know, let's be clear. If this thing passes, he has said, and his contract is up in what, January, June, whatever, any law enforcement officer needing to report to 14 different people would be wholly unbearable. That's what this does. So it doesn't deal anything with arbitration, doesn't deal with contracts, doesn't deal with all the guns that are in our community, sensible gun laws. That's something we gotta do. And I'm gonna finish up with this. This is a magic 8-ball. I don't know if you guys saw this. It was in the strip. And I thought it was just great because it's like, defund police, not sure. Funded how, can't say. Who's in charge, reply hazy. No chief, ask later. Like, that we don't have any answers. So this is what we're hearing is trust us. And by the way, we could have a new mayor. We could have a new city council. And it's like, trust us. And you know, of course, some chairs are gonna change on the deck, right? We know that. But it's like, trust us. We're gonna come up with something great. Y'all gonna be happy. And again, it only deals with this side of the ledger in terms of police violence, sort of. It doesn't deal with all of the murders and violence that have happened in my neighborhood, and the neighbors who are leaving, and the Uber drivers and Lyft drivers who have been held up at gunpoint, the businesses that are leaving because of it. There are Black businesses that are saying, give us more cops. And by the way, people keep saying, I want more cops. That's unfair. That's really unfair. Because it's like, I got $100 here and you take 50 of my dollars. And I say, dang, I want 50 back. And then you say, oh, you want more money. It's not fair. I just want my $100 back. And so those are the things that we're dealing with. And I'm going to close and answer any questions. We do not need to pass this initiative to do the things they're saying we should do. So we don't want armed police at every situation in Minneapolis. Of course we don't. That doesn't happen now. The Minneapolis City Council has overridden their partnership with the county. The county has a COPE program, a co-responder program that was already being utilized by Minneapolis and many other counties. And they stopped doing it because of COVID, and then they didn't fund it. And then the city said, we want to do our own thing. So they took $6 million and they've invested it in a new mental health approach for the city. They did that without passing this ballot. Having more social workers, more mental health responders, more addiction counselors. We don't need to change the charter to make that happen. But thank you, Carol, for standing up, because I told her I could talk forever. Let's move to questions, but we are being presented with a zero-sum game. Like, either you're for this ballot or you are against Black people and reform. And I gotta tell you, it's a false choice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Everyone can submit the questions, and Bill and Ken will. Thank you so much.
And by the way, I'm saying it again, I don't know if I'm right. I don't know. And I agree with the spirit behind saying yes to the ballot question. I get it and I understand it. I don't know if I'm right. And I think that what's going to happen is that if this ballot question passes, so many people who look like me are going to be harmed because of it. And then the rest of us will come back to the middle. And we'll start talking about reform and refund.
Thank you, Sandra. Again, grateful that you came back home tonight.
Yeah.
So we have some questions. Thank you, guys. Thanks for your presentation. I think a core goal of the Defund initiative is to find a way around the powerful and entrenched police union.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think reforming can address the police union and its power?
Yeah, thank you. That's so true, because the union is so powerful. And so I'm gonna be like just straight up. And so I'm just gonna tell you, I love unions. I suckled on the nipple of a union. My father grew up in Jim Crow, Georgia, and they were poor. He drank out of nigger water fountains, moved north, joined the Longshoremen Union, right, in New Jersey. And so we became middle class because of that union. So trust me when I tell you that I'm not against union. So the challenge is what we have right here is this ballot does nothing about the contract. And so what people will say is, well, you know, the minimum, what we hear is the minimum requirement for officers, by the way, which 8 of us from North Minneapolis were successfully able to sue the city because we didn't have the minimum number of officers. We have the fewest officers of any city our size in the country. So just know that. But anyway, we were able to sue because there was the minimum number in the charter. So what we hear people say is, you know what, that minimum number was the union making a deal with other powerful white men. That's how it came to be in 1964 or something like that. That sounds a lot like the Constitution of the United States, right? So yeah, like a lot of shit's been created by powerful white people who had a plan. But we don't throw out the entire Constitution. We don't say, oh, it's because they did this. We make amendments. And we weigh equity and justice when we make those amendments to this flawed Constitution, because we're flawed as human beings. I don't care if you're a white man or a black woman, we're flawed, right? And so that's what we have here. And what I'm saying from my vantage point is to use that as the reason to ignore the lack of officers that we have right now to keep us safe, which ballot question has nothing to do with, and to overlook what's happening at the state. By the way, this did go to the state after George Floyd died. The only union, the only political party that supports the police union are the Republicans. That's the only union that supports Republicans, is the police union. And even the Republicans at the state were willing, after George Floyd was murdered, to change, to change the arbitration rules around the union. And it got blocked by unions. Just want to be clear. The same unions that are supporting ending the police and the department blocked the arbitration rules, which allowed mediation to happen and rogue police to be forced back on chiefs. We gotta get honest about what's happening.
We have about 10 more questions, so we'll ask you to keep a little bit briefer.
That was good. And then just cut me off.
I'm going for it. How will, you answered the first one this person had was about the union. The second question they have is this: how will the city fund professionals can collaborate with and alleviate the responsibilities of the police force? Example, mental health professionals, social workers, those are familiar with addiction and homelessness. So they're saying, how will the city find professionals who can collaborate and alleviate the responsibilities of the police?
Okay, so really quick. So right now we have an encampment that came up in North Minneapolis on Penn and Lowry. And council member Cunningham was calling the 4th precinct saying women are being abused in these encampments. Y'all know that's happening, right? And rape is happening, robberies are happening. What are you gonna do? and folks in the 5th precinct, sorry, 4th precinct, we're the 5th ward, are like, we just don't have the cops. And so they're like, well, the addiction counselors won't go in. Like we just gotta get real about what's happening. And by the way, social workers, mental health workers, addiction counselors, I don't know when they all got cleared of racism. So yes, cops have lethal weapons, but this Pollyanna thought of, oh, when we have them, all racism is gonna go away. Isn't that why most Black and brown kids are in out-of-home placements? Because of some of the racism that happens in terms of social work, right? So this is not a Pollyanna solution, and we can do it. We need funding. The county does it best. Every county health worker is saying what the city is doing, they feel as though it's totally out of bounds. They have the expertise. Fund it, let's do it.
Thank you. You said we already defunded the police and now we're abolishing the police. Can you clarify the difference between the two? What has already been done and what implications question 2 has for both?
Thank you. Thank you. It's holy water. Well, I need some of that. And by the way, I'm gonna keep saying, I don't know if I'm right. Okay, I would just keep saying that. So nobody, you don't have to fight me. I don't know. You could be right. But again, Jeff, the gist of it was, you don't have to read the whole thing.
You said we
Defund, abolish. Okay, so the big difference is, so at the beginning of 2020, we had the budget for the police was 194 million. And today the budget is 165, right? So that's 30 million down. And what people will say is, well, you know, cops have retired, they've gone out for PSTD. There's all these reasons to have the budget lower. We know not like, okay, 9 council members stood on a stage and said, we are gonna work to defund the police department. That is what they did and what they worked on. Abolish is what Ant's saying yes to number 2 does in terms of the department. So we eliminate the police department, we eliminate the role of police chief, and we replace it with the Department of Public Safety. But, and I have been in debates with Janae. So I'm just telling you, and by the way, I love Janae. By the way, the women who have been debating on opposite sides of this, we've kind of like, I don't agree with you. In fact, we kind of come out like this. And then afterwards, it's like, girl, let's go have a drink. The guys haven't been so nice, okay? But anyway, I adore Janae. Janae Bates is the communications director for Yes4. But in one of the debates that we had, Janae said, we just want the police department to have more supports, so they're not the only response. And I said, Janae, stop saying we want the police department to have more supports. We are eliminating the police department. We're not going to have a police department. Yes, we'll have police. And by the way, this, and police by ordinance, this ballot question doesn't do anything around accountability and transparency for the police that we have. There's nothing in it about that. But we are eliminating, we are abolishing the police department, the police chief, minimum requirements for the number of police and funding.
Before I ask this, we all came to say yes, and she laid out the plan. And I've also talked personally to Andrew Johnson. So this is Carol's question to you. My understanding is there is a police department. Police Chief Ariando or someone like him would stay present. We still have police officers, but it's just a different department. That is my understanding. That was a presentation that was given to us 2 weeks ago.
Wow. Thank you, Sister Carol. Drinking my holy water. So I'm standing here with the actual ordinance. The ballot question, right? And in fact, it has a bunch of stuff crossed out. And Carol, I am going to wait. Where is it? I got all my stuff. Here it is. So here's ballot question number 2. Okay, I'm just gonna be clear. I'm gonna read it. So this is not Sandra. This is what ballot question number 2 says. Shall the Minneapolis City Charter be amended to remove the police department and replace it with the Department of Public Safety that employs a comprehensive public health approach to the delivery of functions of the Department of Public Safety, with those specific functions to be determined. Okay, so Carol, there is no plan. It says to be determined by the mayor and city council by ordinance. And by the way, mayor and city council have never agreed, and we know about this council, which will not be subject to the exclusive mayoral powers over blah, blah, blah. So, but I just want to stress, the ballot says, shall the Minneapolis City Charter be amended to remove the police department and replace it with the Department of Public Safety? That's what this says. When you say yes, you're saying yes. And that's the daggone reason why me, my husband, and a bunch of Northsiders sued the city multiple times, because we believe, I want to be clear about this, we believe that in democracy, people have the right to vote. But even more important than that, people have the right to be clear about what they're voting for or against. And this ballot language, because Carol, you even being able to say, from what I understand and what they say is not what's here. It's not what's here. We get rid of the police department. We get rid of the police chief. We get rid of, I can read it all. I'm not gonna read it. It's all here. I can leave it, Jeff, if people want the thing. And what it does say, when it says in the explanatory note, and by the way, the reason the explanatory note is there is because I sued the city. That's why the explanatory note is there. And it says we could have peace officers if necessary.
The chief came out yesterday and is under an ethics violation by the city council, currently being challenged by an ethics violation, because he came out saying that this is, to use your word, crazy. Crazy. Do you know the number of police that he is requesting?
Do I know the number?
Yeah.
Well, he requested 400 in 2020. More. And that's when we had like 800 and some police officers. Now we have 500 and some police officers. So just to be clear, and by the way, this thing around, so make no mistake, it is the president of the city council, Lisa Bender, who has brought the violation. right? That that appointed official would take a stand around a political issue is a violation. Can anybody go back a couple of slides to that defund stage? We had 9 city council members who took a political decision with political action committees to defund the police. I say that's an ethics violation.
It was 1 week after the riots.
Sorry?
They did that 1 week after the riots.
Yep.
Okay, there's 2 more questions here. So we want to go on with that. A question from Zoom. So what are you for in terms of improving public safety?
Thank you. What am I for in terms of improving public safety? So a couple things. One, that our community, and when I say our community, the city of Minneapolis, that we get invited to a table to talk about what all of us imagine for public safety. This is not what Sandra wants. Sorry, that ain't gonna hold mustard. They never asked all of us what we saw, what we wanted, and then put that plan forward for us to vote on. This has been a political action committee funded by outside forces around what we do here in Minneapolis. So I ain't even gonna say what I want, Carol. It is what we want, and we have not been asked what we want.
If we vote no, what next? How do we move forward against the violence and weeding out the bad cops and holding them accountable?
Carol, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry. What if we vote no?
If we vote no, what next? How do we move forward against the violence and weeding out the bad cops, holding them accountable if we stay with status quo, in other words?
Yes. So that's such a good question. So a couple of things. We got to vote the right people in. So that's just the bottom line. And I'm talking about both and people. People who say the current system is corrupt, gotta eradicate that and have something new, reform and refund. We can't leave the Black people who are being disproportionately killed, victimized, and hunted on their own. We gotta, as a city, come and be behind them. So both and. So that is both reform, that is going to the Capitol and demanding we change arbitration rules, which force police chiefs 50% of the time to rehire, reemploy cops that they deem dangerous to society, right? We can change that together. We can change gun laws. We have too many damn guns in this city. And I'm sorry, Pastor. I'm sorry. Well, people in hell are,
I think you even said shit once. I've
I
done that from there
I
too.
did. I'm sorry. And I meant to apologize then. But anyway, we have too many guns on our streets. Can we get busy with demanding sensible gun rules? This will mean, let me tell you what this means. So changing arbitration rules, changing sensible gun laws, insisting on funding for mental health, for social workers, for drug counselors who are in partnership with a fully funded police force. That all of that can happen by us and make a world and hold people accountable. You know how we hold people accountable in a democracy? We vote them in and we vote them out. And we vote on policies that actually make a difference for the majority of us. And right now what's happening is we have a city of well-meaning white people who are telling 75% of Black people who say we don't want fewer cops, and only 42% who say we want a new Department of Public Safety. Basically, the white majority is saying we know better, and we're gonna take care of you.
Well, that was quite a presentation. Thank you, Sandra. It was very passionate. And we want to have each side represented. So we want to thank everyone for coming tonight. And there is, some of you may have already voted. We have the in-person voting next Tuesday for those that are residents of Minneapolis. You can go to, is there a website they can go to get further information for your site?
Oh, so, right, I'm a mama. I'm not with an organization per se, Carol, but there are a lot of different sites and people, need to, yes, for Minneapolis, you all know about that. That's they're voting no. All of Minneapolis are folks who are voting yes. And so.
All Minneapolis from Minneapolis.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So that would be.
Thank you, sis.
Well, we want to thank everyone for coming, and we're wrapping it up then to conclude tonight. And thank you for coming to the second forum. Is there anything else?
Yeah. Again, our goal was to present both sides. I think as a church, we wanted you to be informed the best that we could so that you could make, because there was so many questions. So thank you guys again for participating. I've never heard you speak before. And I know now after tonight, what a great loss it was for our church when it wasn't the right time. But I'm grateful for you coming. Please greet Dawn. And one of the real cool things that she said tonight was that her and Janae, different sides, different opinions, right? But that doesn't need to create animosity and heartache and division. We think differently, but we act, right? And that's the most important thing, is act. And we created a little pub so that you could have, you and Janae to have that drink together. So, all right. But yeah. So anyway, yeah. I'm a terrible salesman. Thank you guys, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And I just want to say again, I don't know if I'm right. Yeah, I don't know, but this is how the Spirit's leading me. And I know the Spirit is in you too.